In an Access Hollywood interview, Cody said his family had been scapegoating Robyn. That is his defense, not an established fact. 2010 tells a different story. Because in TLC's introduction to Robyn, that same man said adding her would change the family dynamic and called it a major event. So the man now calling Robyn a scapegoat is the man who once introduced her as the change itself. He is describing a choice he made, not a storm that blew through his house. In a recorded family conversation, Robyn asks the other wives whether the problems are because of her, and they tell her no. They point to other changes, and not to her. That answer stays with me the whole way through. It is also not a clean bill of health, because sitting inside a structure and having no power inside it are two very different things. This is a timeline. Who built the unequal structure in this family? How much room Robyn actually had to move inside it? And why scapegoat is too small a word once you line the receipts up next to it. Cody handed me his defense. His own receipts get to test it. The Brown family sold itself on one word, and that word was equal. Christine has said that in the early years, the wives were supposed to stand on the same footing, 4 women in one marriage with no one out front. Whether that ideal ever fully held is a fair question on its own, but equality was the promise the family made in public, and it is the baseline every later change has to be measured against. Then Cody added Robyn, and he did not treat it as a small thing. In TLC's 2010 introduction, he described bringing her in as a major event, something that would change the family dynamic. He was not describing weather that rolled in over the house. He was describing a decision, and he made it as the one person in that marriage who got to make it. It puts the authorship exactly where the receipts put it. The man now on camera calling Robyn a scapegoat is the same man who, more than a decade earlier, announced that adding her would reshape everything. He introduced a new dynamic on purpose and narrated it while it was happening. And in this particular family, that distinction carries real weight. The whole premise the Browns offered the public was that plural marriage could work precisely because every wife ranked the same. Equal time, equal standing, equal say. Without that, you are not bruising a feeling. You are pulling out the one beam the entire arrangement was resting on. So when the man in charge starts visibly leaning, he is not breaking a mood. He is breaking the promise that held 4 marriages in the same house. The courtship is where that leaning starts to show. The recorded wedding dress scene shows a conflict over Robyn's dress, and it shows Cody taking part in the disputed choice instead of standing back from it. What it shows is a husband who is supposed to be even-handed putting a hand on the scale during a wedding, which in a plural family is close to the most loaded room there is. A moment like that does not stay in the past. It becomes the first entry on a ledger the other wives start keeping, the day they learn that even-handed was negotiable after all. Christine felt the tilt, and she said so. In the family's own courtship retrospective, she set the earlier sense of equality against what she saw between Cody and Robyn. Something different, a Cody who seemed more in love than she remembered him being with her. That is Christine's account of how it felt from inside the marriage, and I am keeping it exactly that size. An account from a wife watching the temperature drop in her own home is evidence, not noise. Robyn did not walk in and break the family, and the wives themselves said as much. In that recorded conversation, when Robyn asked whether the problems were because of her, the other women told her no and pointed somewhere else. The people closest to the damage put the cause elsewhere, and that belongs in the record right next to everything Cody was choosing to do. My read is straightforward. The moving agent in this first chapter is Cody. Robyn is courted, Robyn is married in, and Robyn takes part in the choices that follow. But he is the one building the conditions, and she is the one stepping into them. Those are 2 different jobs, and the heavier one has his name on it. That is the distinction the scapegoat defense needs you to blur. If Robyn is the author, then Cody is only a man who got swept along inside his own marriage, and the picture of him in that footage refuses to sit still for it. He is not swept along in the 2010 introduction. He is reading the change out loud like a man reading his own plan. The new relationship is still new here. The moment it hardens into a position no one else in the house can touch comes later, and it comes one habit at a time. Cody eventually says the quiet part in his own voice, and when he does, it lands harder than anything I could say for him. A feeling is easy to wave off. Christine can be told she imagined the tilt, that every marriage has its seasons, that jealousy reads more into a glance than is really there. So the feelings can wait. Something you can point at is sturdier, and in a plural family that something is time. Time is the currency here. A night spent in one house is a night the other 3 houses lose, and unlike a mood, that math is hard to argue with. The show puts the question of favoritism to Cody directly, and he rejects the word favorite. He will not wear the label. Instead, he reaches for a gentler phrase. He says, "Robyn found favor." The phrase deserves its fair hearing because it is doing careful work. Finding favor is the language of scripture and grace. It describes something that settles on a person from the outside, unearned and unasked for. In Cody's telling, Robyn is not a schemer who went hunting for advantage. She is simply someone favor happened to land on, the way weather lands, the way luck lands. And if you freeze the tape right there, it almost sounds humble. It almost sounds humble until you notice who is missing from the sentence. Favor does not drift down from the sky in a marriage. Favor is granted, and it is granted by the person with the power to grant it. Robyn finds favor with Cody, only because Cody is the one holding it out. The phrase finding favor is built to hide the hand doing the choosing, and the hand doing the choosing is his. It is a beautifully passive way to describe an extremely active decision. The passive phrasing runs straight into a wife with a calendar. In that same conversation, Janelle does not reach for grace or favor. She talks about time, and she says the time Cody spent at Robyn's house was disproportionate. That is a different kind of claim. A feeling is arguable. A pattern of nights is harder to wave away because it is the currency itself, and Janelle is saying it kept moving in one direction more than the others. This is why the time claim carries more than it first sounds. A disproportionate night is a structural fact, dressed up as a romantic one. It is a withdrawal from the exact account the whole family promise depended on. Every extra evening at Robyn's is an evening Mary, Janelle, and Christine were structurally handed the short end of. The equality that was supposed to be the point becomes the thing quietly getting spent. That is the beam from earlier, load-bearing, coming out one night at a time. And then Cody removes the last of his own cover. Later on the record, he acknowledges favoring Robyn, not finding favor, favoring. The active verb he spent that earlier conversation dodging comes out of his own mouth. And once it does, the careful line between favor that lands on a person and favoritism that a person hands out simply falls over. He was the one holding it out. He said so. The collision is the whole point, because the 2 Codys are talking past each other. The Cody of the interview wants you to believe Robyn is a scapegoat, a woman carrying blame for weather he made. The Cody of the record admits he favored her. Both claims can be true at once, and that is the trap. A man can favor a woman, and that same woman can still catch blame she never earned. But his admission cannot be spent as proof of his innocence, and the scapegoat defense is quietly trying to spend it exactly that way. So the phrase favorite wife stops being a fan nickname somewhere in here. A nickname is what strangers invent from the outside. This is the family itself, on camera disputing how the time was divided, and Cody himself admitting where his preference went. And favoring is never only a matter of hours. My read is that it shows up in whose comfort sets the plan and whose version of a hard day the household is asked to absorb. I am reading forward from his own admission when I say that, and the admission is his. When Cody's preference gets to reshape time, and then loyalty, and then who answers for what, it stops being a mood and becomes a structure. A structure is just a preference that got to repeat until it hardened. He built it the slow way, through exceptions, through hours, and finally through a word he said out loud about himself. And a position like that is never only something done to the people around it. Someone lives inside it. Robyn lived inside it, and what she did from in there is where this turns next. A favored position is more than a feeling of being chosen. It comes with things a person can use. Proximity is the main one. When Cody was spending those disproportionate nights at Robyn's house, he was not just handing her time. He was handing her access, and access is the quiet power in any family. Being favored means being the one who is there. It means being the last word before a decision, the version of a disagreement he hears while the others are across town in their own homes. That takes no scheme, only proximity. And proximity is exactly what all those extra nights delivered. That access shows up in one specific, named story. According to a US Weekly recap of what the family has said publicly, Christine confided something to Robyn, and that something made its way to Cody. What followed, in Christine's telling, was consequence. The private thing she shared traveled, and the trust she had extended came back to cost her. Robyn tells it differently, and her version belongs right here beside Christine's. Robyn has said she believed she was helping. Cody, for his part, described what she did as advocacy, standing up for the family as she understood it. The two accounts sit side by side, and neither one cancels the other. Christine experienced a breach. Robyn describes an act of care. Both can be honest descriptions of the same afternoon. Cody's own word for it does more work than he intends. He called it advocacy, not a slip and not a misunderstanding. Advocacy is something a person does on purpose, for a side she has chosen. In defending Robyn, Cody accidentally sketches a woman who was acting, and his vocabulary keeps handing her agency while his interview tries to take it back. Intent cannot reach across the table and hand Christine her trust back. Even if Robyn meant every bit of it as help, the effect Christine describes still happened. Something shared in confidence traveled to the one person it was most dangerous to reach. And in a plural marriage, confiding in a sister wife is the entire social contract. These women were asked to share a husband, which only works if they can trust each other with what they would never hand to him directly. A breach in that channel is more than a spat. It is a crack in the one support the sisterhood had left while the marriage was straining. The exact size of this is the point. One incident with a name attached to it, not a filing cabinet of them. And one is enough. One named breach retires the picture of Robyn as a woman sitting powerless in the corner of her own marriage. Powerless people do not hold information that changes what happens to someone else the moment it moves. Robyn held it. This is where the word scapegoat starts to strain. A scapegoat is powerless by definition, loaded with blame for what other people did and other people controlled. Some of that did land on Robyn, and I will come back to it. But a scapegoat sits at the edge of things, with empty hands. The label wants you to picture Robyn standing there. The Robyn in this record sits closer to the center, and her hands keep turning out to be full. One question sits in the middle of the table now. Can a person be blamed unfairly and still hold real power at the same time? Robyn is where that question stops being abstract. So the record hands me something other than a bystander. It hands me a woman with the best seat in the house, who at least once used what that seat gave her in a way that cost another wife something real. That is a fact about Robyn, and it earns its place right beside the favoritism Cody built. The verdict stays open a while longer, but it will have to answer for this too. Precision is not a favor to Robyn, it is the opposite. The vague version of this, the one where everything is her fault, is the version she can actually escape because it overreaches and falls apart the moment you press on it. Strip that overreach away and what is left is smaller, sharper, and far harder for her to shake off. So the marriages are where I start separating the blame that misses from the blame that sticks. Cody stood at 4 weddings. Every vow in this family was his to keep and his to break. A plural husband takes on 4 marriages at once, and sustaining each of them is the job, not a favor he grants when he feels like it. When one of those marriages came apart, the promise that failed was a promise he had made to a woman he had chosen. Under a roof he ran. Robyn married Cody. The other 3 married him too. A person can only break the vows she actually stood up and made, and the vows that broke here were his to keep. Blaming the 4th wife for the first 3 marriages is like blaming the new hire for a company the founder spent decades running into the ground. And the women with the most reason to blame Robyn spent years declining the chance. In that recorded conversation, when Robyn asked if the problems were her fault, Mary, Janelle, and Christine had an open invitation to say yes. They said no. They pointed at the arrangement and at Cody's choices, and they kept pointing there. That answer is worth even more because of when it came, before the bitter splits, back when the hurt could have aimed itself anywhere it wanted. The people closest to the wreckage aimed it at the structure. When the people a woman supposedly wronged keep refusing to convict her, an honest critic slows down. There is a tell in who benefits when Robyn absorbs the blame. The same man who built the favoritism gets to stand beside it and point. Kody made her the favorite, and now Kody calls her the scapegoat, and both moves keep the camera off the one person who was present for every chapter. The scapegoating is real. The hand running it is the same hand that did the favoring. The distinction doing all the work here is between two very different charges. One says Robyn built the unequal structure. The other says Robyn acted inside a structure Kody built. That is the whole game. And blurring it gets you the wrong answer in both directions. Blur it one way, and Kody walks, recast as a bystander in his own marriage. Blur it the other way, and Robyn walks, recast as furniture. The record refuses both. The case against Robyn goes wrong at the exact moment it stops describing and starts inflating. The footage shows favoritism, and one named breach of trust. The loudest online version shows a mastermind who engineered every collapse in the family. One of those is on tape. The other is imported. Even Kody, reaching for the worst, said the catfishing information was probably brought through Robyn. Probably. The most damning thing her own critic-in-chief could muster still came wrapped in a hedge. The public record stops well short of Robyn causing the entire collapse, and pretending otherwise only hands her a defense she did not earn. So the honest split looks like this. Robyn has carried blame for Kody's failed marriages, and that blame is unfair because they are his failures wearing her name. An unfair blame and unusual power can sit in the same person at the same time. Someone can be handed too much blame and still be holding too much power. Conceding the first only clears the fog around the second. That clears the way to the one question still standing. Being blamed for too much still leaves Robyn a woman who acted, not a bystander that things merely happened to. The defense on the table claims something larger than fair blame. It claims she was essentially powerless. Everything in the record so far pushes the other way, and that collision is what the verdict has to settle. So the receipts are all on the table, and they add up to a verdict in 3 parts, the kind that names who did what and refuses to blur it back together afterward. First, Kody owns the failed marriages and the structure that framed them. He announced the change when he brought Robyn in. He courted her with the exceptions the wedding dress scene put on tape. He let the time drift toward her house until Janelle said so on camera. He defended the tilt with the soft language of finding favor, and then he dropped the language and admitted he favored her. That is not a man things happen to. That is the architect, signing his work one choice at a time. Kody built the hierarchy. Kody profited from it. Kody answers for every marriage that broke inside it. And the scale of it is the whole point. This ran for years and across 4 marriages, not a bad week and 1 rough patch. The equal footing the Browns sold to the public is the thing Kody spent, slowly, in favor of one wife, until the tilt stopped being an event and became the shape of the house. A decade of that is not an accident. It is a preference, exercised over and over and dressed up as grace. Second, a real share of what Robyn gets blamed for belongs to Kody. The collapse people pin on her is mostly his failures wearing a borrowed coat. Those were his marriages, his vows, his to keep, and the internet's cartoon of a woman who single-handedly detonated a family is exactly that, a cartoon. Kody was content to let it stand, because every hour the audience spends blaming Robyn is an hour it spends leaving him alone. Third, Robyn acted, and this is the part the scapegoat story needs you to forget. She lived inside the favored position, instead of merely standing in it. She took the time, the access, and the standing that came with being the one Kody chose. She was the wife whose house he was always at, the one the favoring admission was actually about, and receiving that, year after year, is its own kind of participation. And in at least one named account, a confidence Christine handed her traveled onward to Kody and came back to cost Christine something real, even as Robyn said she only meant to help. Benefiting from a rigged house is one thing. Being the place a sister's secret stopped being safe is another, and that one has Robyn's own name on it. The wives were right that the blame was bigger than Robyn. They were right about the blame, and quiet about the power. So calling Robyn the scapegoat is not exactly a lie. It is a spotlight, aimed to light up the blame and leave the power in the dark. With both of them lit, the picture is plain. Kody built the unequal structure, and Robyn moved through it with her eyes open and her own interests intact. Honest criticism holds both of those at once and turns down the trade where admitting one is supposed to erase the other. And the receipts save one last thing for the man at the center of it. Cody decided who the favorite would be. Now Cody has decided who the scapegoat will be. Same family, same power, same hand on the scale, only pointed at a different wife this time. The favoritism and the blame were never two separate events. They were one man, choosing twice who the rest of them had to arrange themselves around. He made her the favorite. Then he made her the problem. That is not a defense of anyone. That is the last move of the person who was running the house the entire time. So here is what to do with all of it. The next time this family lands on your feed, when someone hands you a one-word story, favorite or victim, or scapegoat, treat the single word as the start of the question and not the end of it. Cody wants the conversation to have exactly one villain, because a single villain is the cheapest way to disappear behind her. The record does not do single villains. It does choices, and names, and costs, and it keeps every one of them on the page at the same time. That is slower than a hashtag, and harder to turn into a meme, and it is the only version that stays fair to the people who actually lived it. Robyn is not innocent, and she is not the engine of the apocalypse either. She is a woman who took a favored seat and used it inside a house that a man named Cody tilted in her favor and is now blaming her for. Both of those are true, and carrying both at once is the only honest way to watch this. And the people who paid for Cody's choices were Mary, Janelle, and Christine. The least an audience owes them is a version of the story that sets the blame down where the receipts set it and leaves it there. That is the whole method on this channel. A confident claim is only worth as much as what survives when you set it beside the public record. Cody said Robyn was the scapegoat, and that claim did not survive its own timeline. Plenty of other confident claims are lined up waiting for the same test. And if you want to see what happens when another confident sister wives claim meets the public record, watch my breakdown of why season 21 is being called guaranteed while TLC is still silent.